The courtroom had never felt colder. People filled every row of the gallery, some reporters, others community members who had followed the chilling home invasion case that had gripped the city for weeks. At the center of it all was a 7-year-old girl named Lily, the only eyewitness to a violent attack that left her mother clinging to life in a coma. She had not spoken a single word about the incident since that night. As she stepped inside, tightly holding her foster mother's hand, Lily looked small and pale under the weight of a heavy coat and heavier silence. The prosecutor offered her a soft nod as she passed, but she didn't look up. Her eyes instead locked on something else in the room. A dog, not just any dog, but a large German shepherd seated near the front, calm but alert, tongue out slightly, his gaze flicking between people with the kind of presence that made you straighten up. A canine officer, no doubt brought in under special circumstances. No one really knew why he was there. Perhaps for comfort, perhaps for protection, perhaps something more. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and decades of experience, called the court to order. This session is now in progress. We'll begin with witness testimony. Will the witness, Lily Hargrove, please come forward? There was a soft murmur as Lily hesitated. Her foster mother gently nudged her. Lily stepped forward, clutching a small plush bear in one hand. Her feet moved slowly. Her gaze never left the canine. She climbed into the witness chair, barely tall enough to sit without help. A bailiff provided a small cushion, and she sat still, eyes wide, lips sealed. The judge gave a warm smile. "Hello, Lily. I want you to know. You're safe here. You don't have to be afraid." Still silence. The prosecutor leaned forward, choosing his words carefully. "Lily, we know this is hard. But if there's anything you remember from that night, we're here to help." The girl blinked slowly, then glanced again toward the dog, and then she pointed. Every eye in the courtroom turned as her small finger aimed directly at the canine. Her lips parted. Two barely audible words slipped out, raspy and hesitant, but unmistakable. "He knows." The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone froze. The judge leaned forward slightly, eyebrows raised. The prosecutor turned, glancing back at the dog, then at the handler, who suddenly looked rigid. The canine, previously calm, had shifted, ears pricked up. His body stiffened. His eyes had zeroed in on something or someone in the courtroom. The handler stood slowly, placing a firm grip on the dog's harness. "Easy, Ranger," he whispered. The dog didn't flinch. His stare was fixed now on a man sitting quietly in the back row. Not a lawyer, not a witness, just a face in the crowd. A man in a gray suit with a notepad in hand. The handler frowned. That was no ordinary interest. Ranger was trained to detect human scent, especially from past crime scenes. He hadn't reacted like this since deployment. Something was wrong. Lily's finger remained raised. "He was there," she said softly. The courtroom gasped. The man in the gray suit slowly closed his notebook and crossed one leg over the other, feigning calm, but his face had gone white. A bailiff began, moving silently toward the back of the room. The judge turned toward the defense table. "Who is that man?" One of the defense attorneys stammered. He's just a paralegal from our firm." The canine growled, low and deep. The judge's gavel slammed. "Court is in recess now." But the story was only just beginning. As soon as the judge slammed the gavel, courtroom security sprang into action. Two bailiffs made their way toward the man in the gray suit, who now looked like he was trying to disappear into the crowd. His eyes darted toward the exit, and his hands trembled just slightly as he reached for a water bottle. The handler held Ranger's leash tightly, but the dog didn't lunge. He remained statuesque, laser-focused on the man, issuing a low growl. From deep in his chest, the judge stood. That man is to be detained for questioning immediately. Clear the courtroom. People rushed to gather their belongings. Some stood frozen, processing what had just happened. Lily was quietly ushered from the witness stand by her foster mother and a court advocate. Her eyes remained on Ranger until she disappeared behind the courtroom doors. The man in the gray suit finally stood as the bailiffs approached. "Is there a problem?" he asked coolly. "You're going to need to come with us," one bailiff said flatly. "On what grounds?" The man challenged, trying to maintain composure. "I'm with the defense team. You can't just detain me because a child points at a dog." "You're being taken for questioning," the other bailiff said, more firmly. "We've had scent-based alert from a certified canine officer. You'll be treated respectfully unless you give us a reason not to." Ranger growled again, stepping forward, only to be gently restrained by the handler. The man's calm cracked for a moment. His face twitched, and he took a step back. That was enough for security to cuff him on the spot as he was escorted out. The handler spoke softly to the lead detective standing nearby. "Ranger has only ever reacted like that. Twice, once during a narcotics raid, and once at the scene of a violent home invasion." The detective's brow furrowed. "The same home invasion we're in court for?" The handler nodded. "You saying Ranger just recognized that guy's scent from the crime scene?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Inside the closed judge's chamber, the mood was shifting from surprise to urgency. The prosecution team, defense, and judge huddled behind locked doors. The man's name was quickly checked against state and federal databases. Nothing came up. No law firm had issued credentials for him. The defense attorneys claimed they'd only met him once, referred through a temp agency that had handled last-minute paralegal staffing. The judge's face was pale with restrained fury. So we had a complete stranger embedded with the defense team in a case involving a child witness? One of the prosecutors leaned in. "We need to re-examine every piece of evidence. Every report. Everything we missed." Detectives rushed to retrieve Lily's case file and reviewed photos from the night of the attack. A blurry figure captured on a neighbor's doorbell camera bore a faint resemblance to the man now in custody. Forensics had previously ruled out the photo due to lack of clarity, but now every detail became critical. Meanwhile, Lily sat quietly in a waiting room with her foster mother, sipping juice. Her stuffed bear was clutched tightly in her lap. Victim advocate leaned in. "Lily, can I ask how you knew that man?" Lily didn't speak at first. Then, in a whisper, she said, "He smelled like the man who hurt my mom. Ranger smelled him too. That's why I knew." Back in the holding room, the man in the gray suit finally spoke during questioning. "I've got nothing to say, lawyer, but the damage was done. The K-9's behavior, the child's reaction, and the courtroom exposure had triggered a chain reaction. For the first time since the attack, detectives had a living lead, and it had come from a little girl and a dog. No one expected to connect the dots. And now, everyone wanted to know, who exactly was this man? And how close had he gotten to escaping justice? In the interrogation room, the man in the gray suit sat stiffly in a metal chair, arms crossed. His demeanor was calm, but the thin sheen of sweat along his forehead betrayed his nerves. Two detectives sat across from him, files open and digital. Recorders blinking red. "You say your name is Thomas Vick?" one detective asked. "That's right," the man replied. "I work freelance, paralegal work. Contracts, research, nothing fancy." The second detective flipped through the printed file. "That's interesting, because we called the agency you claim to work for. They've never heard of you. No record, no payment trail, no contract." Vic shrugged. "Must be a mistake." The first detective leaned forward. "We're not playing games. You were in a courtroom representing the defense on a case involving a child witness and a violent felony. Then a certified police canine alerted on you, the same canine assigned to the original. Crime scene? That's not a mistake. That's a red flag. Still, Vic said nothing. Meanwhile, across town, forensic technicians were rushing to reprocess evidence. Underneath Lily's mother's fingernails, they had previously found trace DNA, but not enough to match to any known database. This time, with better equipment and a new sample taken from Vic during booking, the techs had something to compare it to, and then came the confirmation. Partial DNA under the victim's fingernails matched Thomas Vic. The margin of error was minuscule. It was enough for a formal charge, but the detectives weren't done, as Vic sat in the room. The door opened, and a senior detective entered, holding a manila folder. "We've got a match," he said, tossing the file onto the table. DNA. Under the mother's nails, partial fingerprint on the child's bedroom closet door, and a time-stamped gas station video showing you 4 blocks away from the scene on the night of the attack. Vic's smirk faded. "You want to keep playing freelance paralegal? Go ahead. But the walls are closing in, Thomas," the detective said. "You're done." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Vic leaned back, eyes cold. "You've got your story. But none of it sticks unless the girl testifies again. Without her, your case is just smoke." He wasn't entirely wrong. Prosecutors knew the fragility of a case that leaned heavily on a traumatized child's testimony. But they also had Ranger the K-9, whose courtroom reaction had exposed everything. And now, they had forensic evidence to back it up. Back at the courthouse, the district attorney called an emergency strategy meeting. "He was embedded in our legal system," she said, pacing. "He had access to evidence files, case timelines, even our witness list. This wasn't just a predator slipping through the cracks. This was calculated." One assistant chimed in. "He likely inserted himself into the defense team to monitor Lily, to intimidate or discredit her if she testified." The thought chilled the room. Across the hallway, Lily was sitting in a quiet break room, Ranger lying beside her with his head resting on her lap. She stroked his ears softly, her small fingers combing through his fur. "He knew," she whispered. Again, Ranger knew before anyone. The victim advocate knelt beside her. "You are very brave, Lily. Because of you and Ranger, a very bad man is going to be punished." Lily didn't respond. She just hugged Ranger tighter. Meanwhile, detectives raided a storage unit rented under an alias that led back to Vic. Inside, they found burner phones, fake IDs, and a notebook filled with surveillance notes, names, addresses, schedules. Lily's name appeared 3 times. He'd been watching her. Planning. Everyone had assumed the danger ended after the attack. But now they realized the real threat had been quietly sitting in their courtroom all along. And it was Lily and a loyal K-9 who had spotted him first. Long before the courtroom drama, Ranger had already come close to exposing Thomas Vic. 2 days after the brutal home invasion, Detective Perez had brought Ranger to the crime scene. The dog was assigned to scent tracking and had a reputation for precision. He sniffed a bloody bedsheet from the victim's bedroom, locked onto the scent, and took off down the alley. For nearly 2 blocks, he was focused, weaving through trash, bins and fences until he halted behind a corner store. There, the trail abruptly ended beside an overflowing dumpster. At the time, the assumption was simple: the attacker had fled in a car. No witnesses. No usable camera angles. The scent trail was filed, documented, and quietly forgotten. Now it resurfaced. Back at the precinct, Perez reviewed the old footage from the corner store. Grainy, low res, but time-stamped correctly. In one frame, a blurry man in a gray hoodie stood beside the dumpster. With new technology and facial enhancement, forensic analysts zoomed in the jawline, the cheekbone, the curve of the ear. It was him, the same man who sat in the courtroom in a pressed suit, pretending to be a paralegal. The same man Ranger had locked onto in a room full of strangers. Perez stared at the screen. "We had him," she muttered. "We had him the whole time, and let it slip." But it wasn't just the past mistakes that were haunting her. It was how close Vic had come to infiltrating every part of the investigation. He had inserted himself into the defense team, potentially influencing legal strategy. He knew the timeline. He saw the witness list. And worst of all, he'd watched Lily in a private hospital room. Lily's mother, Ava Hargrove, had just woken up. Tubes lined her arms, and her voice was raspy from weeks of silence. But her eyes held awareness. Lily entered with her foster mother. Clutching Ranger's leash. Ava reached out, barely whispering, "Baby." Lily ran to her and hugged her gently. The mother cried. It was the first moment of peace they'd shared since the night everything was torn apart. Detectives arrived shortly after. They explained the recent developments gently, how Lily's testimony and Ranger's reaction had triggered the investigation that exposed Vit. Ava nodded slowly. He was there," she whispered. "He wore a mask, but his voice. He told me not to scream. He said he'd be watching." The words chilled everyone in the room. Downstairs, law enforcement leadership gathered in a private strategy session. FBI agents had joined, suspecting Vic might be linked to other unsolved cases. He had the hallmarks of a serial predator: stealthy, organized, manipulative. "Wherever there's chaos," one agent said, "he blends in. He doesn't run, he embeds." The district attorney leaned forward. "We need to charge him before he finds a way to vanish. I don't care if he has 5 fake names and a dozen clean records. He's not slipping past us again." Meanwhile, Lily and Ranger sat outside the hospital cafeteria. People passed them with warm smiles. Some recognized the girl from news blurbs. Already surfacing online, Child and K9 help expose courtroom intruder in shock twist. Lily wasn't paying attention. She held a crayon and was drawing on a napkin. A picture of her mom and Ranger, standing in front of a big building that looked like the courthouse. In the drawing, everyone was smiling. Back at the evidence room, detectives finished cataloging the contents of Vic's storage unit. Among the fake IDs and surveillance notes, they found something chilling: a copy of Lily's school photo, folded neatly beside a map of the courthouse. There was a red circle around the courtroom she'd testified in. He'd planned it all, but what he didn't plan on, what he never could have accounted for, was a little girl's courage, and a loyal dog who never forgot a scent. 2 days later, the courtroom was barely recognizable. Extra security guards lined the walls. Badges were checked twice. Every face was matched against ID. Metal detectors had been brought in, and the press had been corralled to one corner. The city was watching now. The case had shifted dramatically. What had started as a quiet attempt to coax a child witness into speaking had turned into a major criminal breakthrough. The judge entered briskly. Her gavel echoed sharply through the hushed courtroom. "Due to new developments," she began, "we are reopening the evidentiary process and placing a formal hold on current trial proceedings." She turned to the prosecution. "You may proceed." The lead prosecutor stood. His voice was firm, controlled, but clearly carried the weight of a man who knew the gravity of what he was about to reveal. "Your Honor, evidence now confirms that an individual posing as a legal assistant, Thomas Vick, was not only unauthorized, but is now the primary suspect in the original home invasion and attempted homicide." Gasps rang out. The defense attorneys looked stunned. One leaned back, visibly shaken. "He was assigned through the agency. I swear, we vetted him." The prosecutor turned to the gallery. Not only was he present at the crime scene, based on DNA and forensic trail. But he also infiltrated the legal process, using proximity to the witness and her family to potentially manipulate or suppress her voice. He had access to confidential case documents, floor plans, and witness schedules. We believe his intent was not just to avoid justice, but to prevent it. The judge's face tightened with disgust. At that moment, Lily was not in the courtroom. She remained at home, watching cartoons with Ranger resting beside her feet. The little girl had no idea that her instincts and 2 quiet words had just broken one of the most disturbing cases the county had ever seen. Back in court, the defense requested a recess and formally recused themselves from representing Vic in any future proceedings. The DA's office filed immediate charges: first-degree attempted murder, child endangerment, unlawful impersonation, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts related to falsifying credentials. The judge approved them all without hesitation. Detectives briefed the public. We believe Vic may have operated under several identities and may be tied to other unsolved crimes in 3 different states. He used his false credentials not only to access secure legal areas, but to target vulnerable individuals. The public was stunned. How had someone so dangerous walked into a court of law under everyone's noses? While the media dissected every angle, Lily's foster mother received a call from the prosecutor. "She won't need to testify again," he said kindly. "Her words in that courtroom and Ranger's alert are enough. We've got everything we need." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. "Thank you," she said. "She deserves peace." Later that night, Lily played with Ranger. In the backyard, she tossed a tennis ball, and he chased it through the grass. For the first time in weeks, she laughed. Not a nervous chuckle or polite smile, but a deep, belly laugh that carried into the warm air. The next morning, Lily's drawing was pinned up in the police precinct, her Ranger and her mother standing outside the courthouse, all smiling. The lead detective smiled too. "You know," he said, "we had all the tools. DNA, evidence, even video footage. But none of it meant anything until a 7-year-old girl trusted a dog more than the rest of us." And it was true. In the end, it wasn't just science or skill that solved the case. It was instinct, loyalty, and the bravery of a little girl who pointed at a dog and spoke the truth the world wasn't ready to hear. By morning, the story had exploded across the internet. Clips of the courtroom moment, Lily pointing at the dog and whispering, "He knows," circulated like wildfire. News anchors called it the most shocking courtroom twist in years. Online headlines screamed, "K9 breaks open case after girl's 2 words," and child witness out suspect hiding in plain sight. Even late-night shows referenced it. Within hours, Lily's name became a trending topic, though officials made sure her full identity remained shielded for protection. Still, her courage inspired millions. Messages poured in. Artists sketched drawings of her and Ranger. Parents shared photos of their kids hugging their own dogs, captioned, "Because they know." The police department, overwhelmed by public support, held a press conference. Standing at the podium, Detective Perez addressed the growing crowd of reporters. "I've been in law enforcement for 19 years, she said, "and I've never seen anything like this. A young girl, traumatized but brave, trusted a dog more than she trusted any of us." And she was right. That moment changed everything. Beside her stood Ranger, calm and composed, now wearing a new badge-shaped medal on his collar. He sat stoically as flashbulbs popped and camera shutters clicked. But when he heard a familiar voice from the crowd, Lily's, his ears perked and tail wagged instantly. She had been invited to attend quietly with her foster mother. Her presence wasn't planned for public view, but one glimpse of Ranger made her break into a run. Ranger met her halfway and nearly knocked her over as they reunited. The cameras froze on the image. The small girl wrapped in the limbs of a massive police canine, her face buried in his fur, and his tail wagging wildly it became an instant symbol of healing. Later that evening, city officials awarded Ranger a Medal of Valor in a private ceremony. Lily received a courage citation in the form of a gold-etched certificate and a framed photo of her, Ranger, and the judge. For security reasons, most of it was kept off public record. But the story had already done what no policy could. Restored faith in something people were starting to lose. Back at the hospital, Lily's mother continued to recover. The moment she saw the news broadcast of her daughter and Ranger, she cried openly, telling the nurse, "That dog saved her. I couldn't, but he did." What touched people the most wasn't just the crime or the capture. It was the quiet force behind the entire event. Trust. Lily had never spoken a word to anyone about that night, not to counselors, doctors, or police. But something in her trusted the dog. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was a kind of silent language only a child and a dog could understand. Whatever it was, it worked. In the following days, police departments across the country began reassessing past cases involving canine alerts that were never followed up. One retired handler wrote in an op-ed, "We always say trust the dog, but we don't always do it. This case proves why we should." Meanwhile, Lily and Ranger became inseparable. He now lived full-time in her home. The police department had made the transfer official, citing his retirement after commendable service. Ranger's job was now simpler, to guard one little girl and help her sleep through the night. The nightmares, once nightly, started to fade. And while Lily never became a talkative child, she no longer sat in silence either. She'd speak quietly at school, answer questions, and even tell stories, especially ones involving dogs. Her counselor called it a breakthrough. One day, during art class, she stood up and shared something with her entire class. She said, "Ranger knew what I couldn't say. He told them for me." And in that single sentence, the whole class fell silent, because in a world that often overlooks the quiet voices, Lily's was finally heard. Weeks passed, but the memory of that courtroom moment remained etched in the public's imagination. Lily had returned to a quiet routine morning serial, cartoons, reading time, and long walks in the park with Ranger. But something about her had changed. She still didn't speak much, but her eyes no longer darted around in fear. Ranger's presence grounded her. At school, Lily became known as the brave girl with the hero dog. Other kids treated her with curiosity, but also admiration. One classmate brought her a handmade drawing of Ranger in a superhero cape. She smiled for the first time that day and taped it to her locker. Back at the courthouse, prosecutors closed out the final details of the case. Vic was formally indicted on multiple felony charges. The forensic evidence, along with the discovered surveillance notes and Lily's initial statement, built a bulletproof case. He was denied bail when questioned. Again, Vic showed no remorse. "The girl was never supposed to talk," he said. "The dog wasn't part of the plan." That quote made headlines. For the city, the case was more than solved. It had become a symbol. Donations poured in for the police department's K-9 unit. Community groups began raising funds for trauma dogs in schools. Local leaders sponsored a scholarship fund in Lily's name for child witnesses and survivors of violent crime. The media requested interviews, but Lily's foster mother refused. "She's had enough cameras in her face," she told reporters. "Let her be a child." But one private moment couldn't be refused. The judge who presided over the case sent Lily a letter inviting her to a small, quiet ceremony in her chambers. No media. Just a few courthouse staff, Lily's family, and of course, Ranger. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Lily stepped inside the chamber with her foster parents, a new dress, and a handmade thank you card clutched in her hand. Ranger padded beside her, wearing his formal badge and medal. The judge smiled warmly. "Lily, you showed us all something rare. Courage that didn't shout, but whispered just loud enough to save lives." She handed Lily a sealed certificate and a small wooden plaque engraved with her name. "You reminded this courtroom that even the smallest voice matters," she said. Lily didn't say anything. She just nodded and handed the judge the thank you card with a drawing of Ranger under a big blue sky, next to a girl holding a teddy bear. The judge opened it, smiled, and gave her a hug. Outside the chamber, a janitor paused as Lily passed. "You're the girl," he said with admiration. "And that's the dog." Lily looked up at him, then at Ranger, and replied softly, "He's my dog now." The janitor chuckled. "Lucky dog." But it was Lily who truly felt lucky. Later that night, at home, she sat on the couch with her mother now, recovering steadily and gaining strength every day. They watched a video together on the tablet, a news story recapping the case and how the K9 named Ranger changed everything. The footage showed him reacting in court, the crowd gasping, and the moment the man in the gray suit was arrested. Ava reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "You were so brave," she whispered. "You saved us both." Lily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Ranger hopped onto the rug at their feet and let out a long sigh as if content, finally off duty. And for the first time since that terrifying night, Lily felt safe, not just protected, but truly safe, because her world, once shattered by violence, had been rebuilt not by power, not by shouting, not even by force, but by trust, loyalty, and the quiet bravery of a girl who spoke just enough to change everything. 6 months later, the courthouse stood quieter, its marble halls no longer echoing with the chaos of Lily's case. But in the minds of everyone who had been there, the memory remained vivid of a girl, a dog, and 2 words that changed everything. Lily now lived full-time with her foster parents, who had begun the process of adopting her. Ava, her mother, continued physical therapy and had progressed faster than doctors predicted. She still walked with a cane, but her spirit had returned. They now lived together in a small home near a wooded park, where Lily and Ranger walked each evening. Every morning before school, Lily fed Ranger his breakfast, brushed his coat, and whispered something into his ear. Her foster mother never asked what she said. It seemed sacred, a ritual between them. Ranger would then sit at the front door and watch until Lily was safely on the school bus. In class, Lily had blossomed. Once silent, she now raised her hand during reading time. Her classmates respected her in ways even adults couldn't quite explain. No one mocked her. No one interrupted her when she spoke. Even the school bully had gone quiet around her. She had become more than just the brave girl. She had become a symbol. Meanwhile, across the country, Lily's story had quietly influenced real change. Police departments in several states began implementing new policies to take K9 alerts more seriously. One major city reopened a cold case after a retired dog's alert matched a new suspect. In another state, a law was introduced to provide therapy dogs to child witnesses during court proceedings. They called it Lily's Law. Back in her small town, the local library unveiled a mural painted by a teenage artist, a giant German shepherd seated like a sentry, and beside him, a girl holding a teddy bear pointing forward. The words beneath read, "He knows." The library invited Lily to see it first. She stared at the mural for a long time before smiling quietly and saying, "It looks like him." Ranger, lying beside her, let out a soft bark as if in agreement. Later that month, Lily was invited to a private luncheon held by the police department. Officers gathered in uniform, and Ranger wore his special blue collar with the gold badge. After speeches and applause, the chief stepped forward holding a sleek wooden box. Inside was a personalized dog tag dotted red. Ranger Hero, Protector, Friend, forever in service to Lily Hargrove. The chief knelt and handed it to Lily. We thought it was time this officer had a new badge, one that matches his real assignment. Lily took the tag, tears forming in her eyes. She looked at Ranger, held the tag against his neck, and nodded. He's staying with me forever, she whispered as people clapped. Lily didn't smile. For the cameras. She simply knelt down and hugged Ranger tight, her arms around his furry neck, face pressed into his side. No one in the room moved, because in that moment there was no longer a courtroom. No suspect. No trial. There was just a child who had survived something unthinkable, and a dog who'd made sure justice followed her home. From that day forward, Lily and Ranger were rarely seen apart. Whether walking to school, shopping for groceries, or attending community events, they moved together as if tethered by an invisible line of trust. Lily's voice grew stronger over time. She began writing short stories, many of them about a brave dog and a silent girl who outsmarted villains. One day, when asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, she answered clearly, "I want to help people who are too scared to talk." And as Ranger sat beside her, watching with calm eyes, it was clear Lily had found her voice, and the world would never silence her again.